Right, so very good afternoon and welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on is the Tech India Transformation Convention, TITC 2021, organized by Industry Live, presented by CartMax by Green Honchos and supported by We Are AR Association. Let's have a look at a short video of CartMax by Green Honchos. Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you can post your questions in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be taking up questions towards the end of the session. As per IDEF, the Indian healthcare industry was projected to grow from $160 billion in 2017 to $280 billion by 2020. And this growth story was fueled by technology in a significant way. The need of the hour is to forge a seamless integration between technology and healthcare if India is to realize its goal of universal health coverage, UHC. Riding on digital transformation, the Indian healthcare sector is poised to address unique challenges in terms of accessibility, affordability, and quality. To talk about the transformation in the healthcare sector with the jab of technology, we are joined by our eminent speakers. Dr. Geeta Manjunath, founder and CEO, Nirmay Health Analytics. Mr. Deepak Puri, co-founder and COO, Care. Mr. Arjun Chaudhary, Chief Business Officer, Fine. Mr. Saurabh Arora, co-founder, Plum. Mr. Luke Coutinho, co-founder, Reset. Mr. Yash Sehgal, COO and co-founder, Beat.O. To steer the session forward, we have Mr. Rahul Narvekar, founder, CEO, the India Network, Startup Studio, and India Angel Fund. To know more about the speakers, ladies and gentlemen, you can download the show catalog from the upper tab on the right-hand side of the screen called the Handout. So if you're ready to start the session, over to you, Mr. Narvekar.
Thank you. So I'm going to just quickly dive into a quick short introduction of with all our speakers, and then we'll just get into a Q&A. So I'll start with the most awesome CV that I have seen in a long time, Dr. Geeta. I've just blown away with. So I think I'll hand it over to Geeta to start. So Geeta, just help us take through your journey of from CDAC to what you're doing right now.
Sure. It's a pleasure to be on this panel of star-studded startup founders and leaders. I'm Geeta, founder and CEO of Nirmay Health Analytics, where we are developing a new way of detecting breast cancer in a completely private manner and semi-automated fashion so that we can help everyone detect their cancer as early as possible and get well soon. That's the sort of the overall thing. A personal journey has been mostly a techie turned entrepreneur because of a personal experience that I have seen in my own family. So I hold a PhD from Indian Institute of Science. And after my master's in IISc, I joined CDAC as one of the members of the team which built the first supercomputer from India. Very proud to be part of the team and see all the good stuff. And then I was also at Hewlett-Packard Labs, first member of Hewlett-Packard Labs, working with international teams to deliver innovation to international. And then I was also at Xerox Research, heading AI research at Bangalore, AI research for the whole of India again. And because of my personal, one of my cousin sisters got detected with breast cancer, and I did really see how breast cancer can affect women, how it can take away almost a lakh of women every year, right? And while breast cancer is completely curable. So, getting intrigued by this problem and very, wanting to solve this problem very deeply, I quit my job and started Ramai with a couple of my wonderful colleagues. So here I am. Last 5 years, we've been looking at this problem and happy to share some of the insights. Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta. Deepak?
Hi, thank you. Happy to be here. I'm, I think, the newest lost among all the speakers in this industry. Before this, I was one of the co-founders at GoIvo. Started there in 2008 with Vikalp, who is my co-founder here as well at EkaCare. We are building a healthcare connected ecosystem. We believe there's a fundamental difference the way healthcare has been delivered today in our country versus the Western world, is that there is hardly any visibility between what a doctor or a healthcare providers sharing with the consumer and the consumer going back. The onus is all on the consumer. So we're building tools and utilities both for doctors, healthcare providers, and consumers to kind of have their standard health records at one place and then monitor their health. We partner with most of the data providers where we can bring in data for our healthcare for our consumers on our platform. We are approved by Covin, so we are the one of the platform where a Covin appointment or certificate can be booked. We've recently crossed 200,000 app installs on the consumer side. Connect consumers to doctors literally 24/7. So giving primary healthcare as a focus and taking that to treasury with the data set is what we are looking at in the connected healthcare ecosystem. Like we did in the travel space, tried to kind of digitize the hotel distribution. We have started with trying to bring all doctors into digitization. So that's our piece on the doctor side. We literally in 24 hours. That's a focus because the primary objective of digitization starts from digitizing the doctor prescription and then the lab reports and stuff like those. Lab reports are also one of the area where we are trying to extract information from reports and give the longitudinal value to our consumer. I think those are some of the features we are really focusing on giving value and creating value for the whole ecosystem. Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you. Arjun?
Yeah. Hi. I'm definitely excited to be part of the panel, and just a quick roundup. Previously, I had a stint at Myntra where I was leading their growth for 5 years and had an interesting stint there. And post that, the four of us. So currently, I'm the chief business officer and one of the founding members at MFine. MFine is put in very simple terms, we are a digital hospital. What we are focusing is on building access to specialty care. That's the core on what we have started with. The key thing, what we've seen is that medical health needs happen at a moment, but the solutioning of it really happens in an appointment, which actually doesn't go hand in hand. You have a problem today, but you actually end up solving after a period. Specialty care access is even poor in India. So how do we bring that change? And I think so that's where how we started it on, with key focus of really bringing in the top providers, which is the top hospitals, the top doctors, onto a platform and giving people access to that. Around this, what we really have built is a very strong AI system which enables in patient data collection and basically helping doctors which acts as a assistive intelligence is what we have basically built, which assists a doctor in prescribing medicines, and assists a doctor in getting to the right diagnosis, and that's what we have built. Over a period, what we have also realized is healthcare happens at various moments, and you have to bring in the concept of care into each. Whether it starts from a doctor consultation, whether it starts from a lab test, whether it starts from a scan, there are various entry points for any healthcare needs to start. And you have to really round it up with the care side of it. So that's what we are into this. One of our key objectives is we are a person who, as a brand, as an organization, who plays in the role of your healthcare, and we are answerable for the health outcomes. We are not just a service provider for any service. So that's how we look at it very differently. And yeah, excited to be part of a very interesting group of people. A lot of seasoned folks who are building right from medical devices to a lot of new technologies on the AI side and insurance, and even on how to look at fitness and health from a very different point of view. Yeah, but really excited to be part of this.
Thank you, Arjun. Saurabh?
Hey, thanks, Rahul. I'm Saurabh, co-founder of a company called Plum. Plum is an employee health insurance and a healthcare platform. In our very first year, we have more than 800 corporates who have chosen Plum as their employee health benefits partner. These includes companies like Unacademy, Twilio, Upstocks, Tinder, and many more. What we have done is we have built a modern employee healthcare platform where we provide really high quality health insurance for the employees of the corporate that comes with no surprises, no hidden costs, and no out-of-pocket expenses, no mis-selling. And second, what we have done is we have built digital experiences in partnership with our insurance partners to initiate, for instance, a claims within 5 minutes, where no more heavy hospital paperwork or envelope shipping. Just take pictures from your mobile phone and you could file for your reimbursements. Get support from the guided claims expert 24/7, and we are opening access to healthcare. I think this is, I do want to stress in this healthcare forum that what we are also seeing is in the post-COVID era, the corporations are not just looking to buy health insurance today for their employees. Instead, they are looking for holistic healthcare strategy for their employees and a corporate for them to invest in different vendors for every piece of healthcare strategy is chaotic to procure and confusing for employees for multiple apps. So this is where Plum comes in, and we replace this disconnected experience with a more connected one where employees can access insurance as well as complete access to healthcare too.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that Tinder part later, man. Yes.
Rahul, thank you. Hey guys, really excited to be able to catch up with a whole bunch of folks from the industry who have a wealth of knowledge and experience. We started Beto because I became a diabetic at the age of 34. I used to be 120 kilos. My HbA1c was 9.5. So my health vitals are really bad, and within a period of 4 or 5 months, I was diagnosed with a whole bunch of conditions. And that's really when the journey began of trying to solve for self. And during that journey, we decided there's an ability to reach a whole bunch of people within India who don't have access to basic knowledge of how to manage their diabetes and manage the condition. And it's not really that complicated. It requires a lot of simple steps and simple processes that people can follow. We can try to bring people back to a meaningful sense of control. And that's the journey we started. I'm happy to say I'm on the right path of solving for myself my own chronic conditions. And today, the way we are growing, we're able to add 30 to 40,000 people every month on our platform to help give the same benefit that I am able to derive out of this service to democratize healthcare for a large group of Indians, which was not possible earlier. So we're extremely excited about building this in India as an India first solution. We didn't want to build devices. We never wanted to build devices, but the challenge was you can't get data or meaningful data from the devices that were available. So that's how the journey of devices happened. And we'll continue to evolve our journey to be able to get meaningful data from consumers and then give them actionable insights so that they can take the small steps themselves to manage their health. And that's the journey for Beto across the chronic conditions. So thank you for this opportunity.
Luke. Luke, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Rahul, hi. Yeah, thanks for having me on this platform. It's amazing to be part of so many knowledgeable people on this platform doing such fabulous work, because it's very clear that we need technology to take health across the globe right now. And over the last couple of years in the practice of integrative and lifestyle medicine, when we look at cases right from terminal cases like cancer to diabetes to simple, issues like obesity and metabolic syndrome, while we have nutrition, we have allopathy, we have all of these, systems of medicine fragmented. I think technology does a great job of bringing it together. And I think over the last couple of years, as all of us know, we have data points, we have knowledge, we have everything available to us. But I think what's also lacking in the entire approach of holistic wellness, preventive wellness, is the cultivation of mindfulness. Because most people already know what they should be doing. Most people will look at their data and they still know what they should do, but they don't do it. So I think as a co-founder of Reset, the team is working on a very, very simple yet powerful app where we look at bringing yoga and mindfulness in a very organized way to the world. Today, a lot of people just do yoga, they just do meditation. But what if this scientific backed method of reducing stress, reducing inflammation, reducing blood sugar levels can actually be customized according to a unique and personal experience, according to the data that you have? There are some pranayamas which suit people. Some of them don't have an effect. In fact, they raise your blood pressure. There are certain asanas that work for you, and some of them work against you depending on your medical condition. So when we look at SVIASA as one of the most prominent universities of yoga and yoga education, not just in India, but across the world, how do we take their knowledge and their wisdom, and how do we use technology, data, and our experience of nutritionists, allopathic doctors, specialists to put it together and give the end user who could be living in any part of the world, an experience of yoga and mindfulness? Because we are a firm belief today, after seeing thousands and thousands of patients, that while you need great expertise from medicine, nutrition, while you have great tools, you have great wearable devices, it finally comes down to someone being mindful enough to use what you already have. And we will achieve that through the Reset app, using a lot of AI, using a lot of tech to actually customize a human being's experience and provide the right amount of tools, the right amount of asanas, and that whole experience of awareness and education over the next couple of months. So again, proud to be part of this platform and learn from everyone else. Thank you.
Okay. So my story, guys, is my name is Rahul Nalvekar. I am a patient of sleep apnea. I use a CPAP machine from last 11 years. But my experience of healthcare is my wife, Pallavi Rao, was diagnosed with an autoimmune disorder called myasthenia gravis in 2005. She had a surgery immediately after to remove something called the thymoma from her thymoma. And then it was discovered that she has a rare form of cancer. And then because of about 8 surgeries in the last 16 years, she had no respiratory system to speak of. In 2015, I was part of NDTV and I was asked, what do you want as a help? And I said, I need the best opinion, second opinion on this, because I had such conflicting opinion from all the best hospitals in the world. And I was sent to this doctor called Dr. Sultan Pradhan in Prince Ali Khan Hospital in South Bombay. And he was supposed to be the best in this space. He looked at all Pallavi's reports and he said, you know what, Rahul, my suggestion to you would be, let us spend as much time as she can with your son because she's got limited time. And me being an entrepreneur, and I said, I don't understand. There has to be a hack. He said, there is no hack. So I was told she has all of 4 months. And luckily for me, Luke came into our lives at that point of time. And thanks to Luke working with Pallavi on nutrition, positivity, all of that, we stressed it. I unfortunately lost Pallavi on 18th of May this year. She had COVID in December and then she went away due to a cardiac arrest. But if I look at the 16-year journey of me spending, and we used to literally spend every winter in Apollo, Delhi, right? I used to walk downstairs and she would be upstairs. Pallavi is a very differently wired person. So when she was on the ventilator in 2015, only her thumbs were working. She wrote 6 love stories on her phone, and I published it as a book called ICU Love Stories. But the point I'm making is I've seen all aspects of this. So I've seen not getting insurance because it was a pre-existing condition. As a caregiver, my wife, I would get so many conflicting opinions. I would be told this is the new technology available, this is the hack available, So I've seen all sides of it. So I'm going to open this up with one key question is, we say, yes, tech is changing things in healthcare, yes. But data, and as Indians and maybe globally, we are very data is there. You use the power of technology to read it, and all this technology of AML, AI, whatever. How much do you think is it reliable? Is it subject to the interpretation of the guy who's looking at it, or is it dependent on what kind of a platform or framework are you using in terms of that data? Like we were just talking about diabetes and continuous glucose monitoring devices and all that. And Luke made a very important point that if you use a CGMS device, that data will tell you that because you ate this, your blood level has gone up. But you have not factored in that maybe you are in a very high stress situation at that point, and that is probably causing the spike. So I'm going to start with Geeta.
Sure. Thanks for sharing your story, and that kind of brings a big different context to the whole discussion. So talking about data and how AI can help, definitely we all know that if there is a medical device which is trying to do some smart stuff, right, using prior experience, it is trying to sort of learn from experience, just like when a new doctor who's just graduating, finishes MBBS or MD, becomes better and better as experience sets in. Similarly, AI machine learning based models essentially are supposed to become better and better as and when they see more data. So in that sense, yes, data will help some of these devices work better. Having said that, it's also very much about how the developer of the model, right? Basically how the whole system is configured and tested. I'll say a few more things about it. So essentially, one is about diversity of data, right? It's not, you can't just keep on pumping the same type of data again and again and assume that the model will become better and better. It's important to, for example, continue to do, let's say, clinical trials, figuring out, for example, in our case, right, at Niramai, we use thermal imaging, and we've developed a novel set of AI algorithms to analyze that to say whether a person in front of us is likely to have breast cancer. So in this case, definitely the way we train the system as we move forward, right, is dependent on, are there certain type of cancers that we are missing? Because even in breast cancer, there are several varieties, if I can call it, cancer itself. And so are we adding enough number of special cases and making this pseudo doctor better experience rather than giving a same type of data again and again? So in order for the AI model to become better as well, this kind of retraining with diverse information is very important. Diverse conditions and so on and so forth is important. And the second piece, which is very important during the building of this, is also about how are we clinically validating these models, right? And I have seen mistakes being made here. Just to share some examples, like especially when a person comes in from a research kind of a background, ML research and scientist kind of background, AI scientists are generally used to looking at public data and trying to show how beautiful our algorithms are with highest sensitivity, specificity, whatever, right under the curve and all that, for a particular data set, when all the answers for the data set is available, right? So you already know all the answers and you fine tune in a way that you actually are getting the best results. That's exactly what is accepted in a published paper many times, from a research setting. But that is not what will work well on the ground, right? We have to test it in what is called as a prospective setting. That is basically as and when people are coming in, just like the doctor doesn't know whether the person in front of him has cancer or not. The machine learning also should never ever know what is the result. It has to be completely blinded, what we call as unseen data, and the clinical validation has to be done in such a setting. And only then, we can say, and of course, if the results are good enough, either it has highest sensitivity, that is ability to detect the disease, or highest specificity, ability to detect that there is no disease, right? Either one of them should be really more than 90-95%. Then it is almost, possible to use this in life. Now, so to answer your sort of, the key intent of the question, yes, I think AI-based medical devices can function, can be trained and tuned and developed in a way that it can function in the absence of doctor also, where such a use case is necessary. And this is something we have seen, in the last 5 years, how our algorithms improved from 70% to 90% and so on. Yes, data was very, very helpful, useful and required for this, but using the and the training smartly. And of course, collaboration with doctors is something that is absolutely essential to figure out, understand domain-based features. Not everybody, when we say AI, they think about like dump a bunch of images and it will come up with a model. It's not really that, right? There's a lot of semantics and interpretation oriented feature engineering that we need to do. So if everything is crafted well, yes, actually database decision making is right enough to work today. Is what I believe.
Okay. Saurabh, your views?
Sure. Look, Rahul, and I could share on behalf of the insurer viewpoint as well, as you brought whether underwriters, the insurance underwriters were able to work with those data as well or not. So one, it's really important for healthcare provider, in this case, for instance, what Geeta's company is doing or what Beto is doing with diabetes, or maybe what Luke with Reset is going to do with wellness and preventive care as well. So one, the healthcare providers, they need to establish clinical outcomes from whatever the incoming data that they are receiving. And this clinical outcome or the success of this clinical outcome needs to be trusted by the insurer. But I can tell you that the insurers usually are always on the back seat. They would not take the underwriting risk on a new technology upfront. This is where the role of the healthcare providers who are building these models based on the data and the clinical outcomes or the promised clinical outcomes, they need to come forward and co-underwrite or share the risk on behalf of the insurer and prove that their clinical outcomes or sort of put the skin in the game by saying that, look, if we bring these processes or adherence, we can co-underwrite the risk along with the insurers to give them the confidence of the healthcare process that they are following. So in summary, the healthcare providers not just have to prove the clinical outcomes, but they also have to take one step further and share the part of the risk in case they want to build a system where the insurer, healthcare provider, and the members are in a seamless network together.
Okay, Luke, you work with like terminally ill patients, right? And while we understand that technology has all these benefits, what are the few areas where you think we need to be careful with tech when it comes to critical care or healthcare? Luke, you're on mute.
Yeah, Rahul, I want to relate it back to your data point as well, where we spoke about data. There is a lot of data. There's no doubt about that, and technology and medicine go hand in hand. There is no doubt about it. But there are also misses on what data we look for and what we should be looking for. So, for example, when we talk to insurance companies and they come and say, hey, Luke, what can we do to keep our employees healthy so that they don't get sick, they don't get cancer, and, we don't have to pay out the claims? It's a very valid question. Many companies are genuinely interested in preventing these problems from them. So when we talk about a very simple model, by just knowing the kind of medication your customers are on, okay, you can literally forecast. And if you add AI to it, it'll get much more efficient, the system. You can literally forecast what possible 4 or 5 conditions that person who is consuming medication today can have in the next 5 to 10 years. And it's all there in medical science. It's not new. So if we take someone who's taking painkillers all the time, or someone who is taking insulin all the time, or someone who's on thyroxine, or someone who's on anti-inflammatories, on steroids, every medicine has a pharmaceutically documented side effect or side effects with it. Now, depending on the duration the person is taking the drug, we know it's called a side effect. Every medicine that you take is going to create a side effect. Now, why is that a bad thing? Because your side effect can be your secondary condition or your secondary ailment that you have. So, for example, certain ER breast cancer patients are on tamoxifen. It's a needed drug. It's necessary. They should take it. But the risk factors are also causing uterine cancers in the future. Okay, so knowing all of these things, that's just an example of a side effect. We know that if we take painkillers for a long time, we can have kidney damage. So you can forecast what's going to happen. And using data more specifically in nature allows us to forecast at a more preventive level what lifestyle changes we can make. Let's take an example of the population of people who are on statins. Statins are necessary. Some people, they say they're not, but we're not here to debate that. But the moment you take a statin, we know scientifically and medically that the body's cells get depleted of CoQ10, which is an enzyme, and selenium. Now, anyone who has a deficiency of a CoQ10 or selenium will have muscle spasms, weakening of the muscles, weakening of the bones, brain fog, darkening of the skin. Now, if the statin was given with the right, nutrition, it was depleting, you have a better case, to an insurer, an insurance company, and even forget about that, for the patient's own healing. So I think data is huge, but what kind of data are we looking for? We're looking for very standard data. Mostly people look for, just the standard symptomatic data. And how do we use that data to further deep dive into connections with what could possibly happen? So when we look at terminally ill patients and cancer patients, yes, technology can definitely help us. But we have many surgeons today in hospitals in the US and Bombay as well. When the candidate is, let's say, for example, the patient is a candidate for robotic surgery for prostate removal. The surgeon will come in between the diagnosis and tell the patient that, hey, listen, I would rather do the surgery on you, because through the MRI, I also sense that there is some abnormal lesion over there, and I would look into it. And I think the system has to be open to both these things happening simultaneously with each other, because I don't think the one thing that technology can never replace is experience of people, experience of doctors who have worked in the field, opened up like 5,000 cases of cancer. So that doesn't make technology bad, but it gives us the opportunity to take technology and how do we move experience with technology to give almost a more conclusive outcome to even a terminally ill patient. By looking at several CT scans or MRI scans of a tumor, what data can we take out of that? Now take a doctor's experience from that, put AI into it, and come down to 5 top possible, treatments for it, or 5 possible, outcomes of what we should be doing with that particular patient. So that's where I see the limitations of technology, but opportunities for technology to not just depend on data, but to also look at how we can integrate experience along with data.
Thank you. Deepak, I'm going to jump to you. So one thing I saw in your series, you're also digitizing records, right? Patient records. And one of my experiences has been that every time I would take Pallavi to see the neurologist, we had to carry all her reports. And this used to be like a bunch. My driver would come and we would go and sit there in the waiting room, and then doctor would say, pull out that one and pull out this one. And I used to always wonder, is there not a simpler way to do it? Maybe on a tablet. And when I once spoke to Dr. Suri, the neurologist, I realized a lot of doctors have their own systems and they're very resistant to looking at records on any other sort of a format,
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, actually, that's what you banged on. That's what the problem we also realized, or each and everyone spoke about data. And when we were doing a little more research, we figured out this structural data is it's not available in this country, literally. I think it's people are lucky if they get the structural data. Just drawing a structure out of data from multiple sources. I'll give you a small example. You go to 2 labs, get your hemoglobin test, a very simple example. The ranges might differ in 2 labs in India. In one lab, your 11 point would be in the range, and then in someone will be out of the range. So data structure varies from the machine the test happens, and it varies from doctor to doctor, and the interpretation of that data. And you're a right example. When you go and see a doctor, first of all these doctors are super busy in life, especially the super specialists. They don't get 5-10 minutes, to look at the records, and looking at 5 files in 5-10 minutes is a problem. We have seen doctors who have teams just collating the data, making the case and giving to the doctor. So these are the real big problems which we identified, and even the government of India now identified. There's a full mission which is NDHM, which is trying to give value back to the consumer in their hands of having their own data accessed at one point. See, today, if you go to 5 hospitals independently, your data will be available in all the 5 hospitals. But there'll be no way for you to have all of them on a single app which you can use. You go to 5 lab scan centers, their data will be available on their data devices or stores or their apps. But there's no way you can just put everything on together. And then people are reluctant in sharing the data. I think that's what NDHM will try to do, and will be kind of working in that direction, saying you bring in all the data at one place and then take the meaningful value. As I just continuing the last point, the data can aid in every diagnosis, can help physicians. They can't replace the physician for sure. So we are building this data sets in such a manner that it can be helpful for that physician to take right decision at right time, right? You alluded to some of the points where you're saying you should know how to interpret the data, and data should give you meaningful insights. Like I'll give you two examples. One is, even if you go to very, very basic primary level where a general physician is seeing like maybe 50, 100 patients a day, he gives like 5 minutes to that patient. In India, people generally don't care about allergies. Some person who has a allergy and the medicine has sulfur in it and is prescribed as sulfur, the causes could be many, many. So those kind of contraindication coming is what the data helps. This is a very simple point where a data helps a physician in saying, hey, guess this patient has sulfur, and you're giving a drug which has sulfur into it. Similarly, self-assessments, there are many tools globally which are available for self-assessment. We're trying to do something similar for India. Self-assessment can help figure out, diagnose what kind of problem you have, but can't, prescribe the drugs. We are anyways, I think, fighting a battle of over-the-counter drugs. People are buying antibiotics and everything, just buying over the counter and eat like candies. Any analytic or AI tool building on top of it and just prescribing drugs will be like a nightmare for our country's healthcare. So those kind of things, the healthcare, AI needs to just help digitize the whole record and give the longitudinal value like in a chronic patient, and let the physician take the right decision based on right data. I think that's the importance of data in our country at this stage.
Yash, to what Deepak is saying, as a country, I know kuch ho jata to we go to the chemist and ask him to suggest what medicine to take, right? But with products being built like what you're building at Vito, okay, do you see a danger of people then looking at their data and trying to self-medicate or whatever and sort of skip out the doctor, the whole thing?
No, I don't think that will ever happen. People won't start to self-medicate and do stupid things like to that degree with chronic conditions at least. People understand. So let's make the distinction between chronic versus non-acute. With acute, people have the tendency to go to the pharmacist and say, "मुझे कुछ दे दो, मुझे बुखार लग रहा है, मुझे कौन सी अच्छी दवाई है आजकल," or something like that. मेरे गले में खराश है, तो मुझे कुछ दे दो. But with chronic, people take a consult, or people want someone to at least look at them, and 80% of time it's a family physician looking at you for a chronic, till the time it becomes complex, or some critical thing happens during that journey of chronic condition. You don't sometimes go to a specialist, at least in this country, and that's what we saw. And I couldn't agree more with Deepak. And when you end up going to that specialist, the specialist has 3 minutes for you or 5 minutes for you, and that's your journey time with him for that. And you could go to a nice fancy hospital in Delhi like a Fortis or a Medanta or an Apollo, and they'd have a fleet of doctors sitting outside making the one-page report for the key doctor to have a look at and have a 2-minute conversation with Rahul, write something, sign, and ask Rahul to go, and the next person comes in. So at least in chronic, we don't believe that the future will be people will start doing things themselves and saying, "Hey, I'm going to stop taking my medicine," or things like that. The thing we do see with chronic, and sometimes especially with diabetes, is, and we've heard it with many consumers across our platform, that मुझे diabetes थी, मैंने 6 महीने दवाई खाई, अब मेरी शुगर ठीक है, अब मैंने दवाई खानी बंद कर दी. And why are you, and when you're picking up the phone saying, "Hey, your blood sugars are high," why your blood sugars high? वो मेरी तो ठीक हो गई थी, मैंने दवाई बंद कर दी. So people stop medication sometimes because they're just not aware that this is something that they need to take for the rest of their lives, or have a better understanding of that. But I would not think that in the near future people will stop taking insulin when they need to take insulin. They might titrate it, and some of the doctors teach people how to titrate, and I'm sure we've met a whole bunch of those doctors, but people won't stop it on their own just looking at data.
Arjun, so one of the things when I was researching, I saw that you guys are saying that we are an on-demand platform, but you can sort of do it from your home office and spa.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you see the same danger that I was discussing with Deepak and Yash, that people say, "Yaar, मैं तो spa में बैठ के I'm getting a diagnostic done," and
Yeah, so I'm not sure diagnostic can be done from a spa, but the real intent is accessibility. I think so. When we talk about all of these situations, like what even Yash was mentioning, right, where he spoke about one side that there are people who skip medicines, and then there is another side of people because they went and met a doctor and they will remain on that same dosage, same level of medicines for years, and they will not even bother about going back, looking at sugar levels. Typically, HB1AC is to be done every 3 months because it's a 3-month average and you have to look at it. I think that's where we want to flip the game. I think so. The point is how you can make accessibility much more easy, right? A lot of, especially in chronic, if you look at it, a lot of information is already available. Diagnostics are available in report formats, which are easily shareable. So really what you need is access with the doctor. You don't really need FaceTime in real sense. In a lot of cases, you don't really need physical interaction, right? There will be times you will need about 5-10% scenarios, but remaining you don't. So how do we change the game around that? And I think so that's a big thing. The other big thing, again, what we also see from a data perspective is we always talk about there are a bunch of doctors who are absolutely great. And we talk about a bunch of doctors, he's okay. When we ask people, who's the best doctor? The best doctor is the one who has maximum data. His ability to collect the maximum relevant information, triage it out to the extent, and how do you? So all of this technology can do a great job. Like I said, you can't really replace the doctor, but you can really assist him with all that information. We were just talking about allergies in a situation. We were talking about a situation that many times there are certain compositions in medicines which cannot be prescribed together. But it's impossible for doctors to remember the whole of what the SIMS guideline says. It's impossible. The best doctors have the best memory and they can do, but when you start building tech around it, when you have this data and you start leveraging it, you really bring in the overall standard of care above. So might be, let's say, if Dr. Devi Shetty is the best cardiologist in the country, what you can really have, you can have 1 lakh cardiologists in India who all are at par at Dr. Devi Shetty. That's what technology can do. You can't really change. It's impossible, most probably, to say that we'll produce a doctor cardiology who's better than Dr. Devi Shetty, but at least what you can do is many more of Devi Shetty's. So I think that's the real game of how data can really play the role here. One thing at least very interesting we also saw is the consumer has certain ways of giving data. So when you give them an open hand, what really ends up happening is data comes in very unstructured format. So just a very interesting thing I think so we tried out is we created a health keyboard. So where a consumer still enters what he has, but he's guided through a system. So he's giving data in a format which the system recognizes rather than just plain free text. I think so data, how do we capture the relevant data and make it accessible? Where it can really change the way what it does on tertiary care, but even basic primary care, I think so the level of standardization and improvement of quality it brings is huge, because typically most doctors spend about 70% of their time on data collection and about 20 to 30% on diagnosis. Technology can actually flip that game. They can get consumers to give the data in a certain way and triage that information for the doctors so that the doctors spend more time on diagnosis rather than information collection.
So I think it's very interesting. What you're saying is, okay, you have one great doctor, say Devi Shetty, and using the power of tech, you can sort of replicate him 1 lakh times or whatever. But if I look at my own experience, several times, especially in the case of Pallavi, I have shown a set of data to a doctor in Apollo Delhi, and he's given me one opinion saying, you know what, Rahul, we'll have to do a tracheostomy, we'll do a hole in the neck here, and this is a ventilator, and that's it. And then I would reach out to, say, Luke and say, you know what, this doctor is saying, Luke, it's Rahul, don't do this. Okay, this is one data set. When Pallavi got COVID December, the moment we got that report positive, I panicked and I was like, I need to get her to Apollo. And every doctor I spoke to said, you have to rush her to Apollo and get her a bed. And that was a time in Delhi we were not getting beds. And I was sitting with a bunch of people who said, oh, we'll get her a bed. And I was about to rush. I said, okay, wait, let me cross-check with Luke. And the first thing Luke said is, Rahul, wait for some time. Wait for, I think you told me 24 hours, right, Luke? And luckily we did not have to hospitalize her. Okay, she was asymptomatic, whatever. The point I'm making here is with tech,
there is a set of data. You are saying, okay, power of technology, AI will read it, ML will read it, interpret it. But what I have seen as my own experiences with certain doctors or people like Luke, I don't know what it is, that they look at the same set of data and give me a different opinion. What are your thoughts? I'll start with you, Luke. I'll start with you.
Luke, you're on mute.
See, finally, data has to be standardized to lead us to some conclusion, to make when we have very little time. Like if doctors have very little time, like, 5 or 6 or 7 minutes for a cancer patient, I would ideally like 2 hours of a patient's time. Not possible. I need it in 30 minutes. So I need my data to be ready for me before the consult even starts. Like files and files of data have to be put together so I can finish my one cancer patient in about 30 minutes. The thing is, everyone has, when there are metrics, of course, there was a saturation level where it was shared that you don't have to go into the hospital if your saturation level is at about 92, 94 and stuff like that. If it drops below 90, yes. The whole thing is you also have to make an informed decision. A lot of patients going in had not even started COVID treatment and they were dying of infection because they have low immunity. So a basis of decision is also on the patient's current assessment of health. We work very closely with Manipal Hospital, and the ICU over there would tell us that, Luke, there are immunity patients, on immunosuppressants, or like in Pallavi's case, or, where the immune system is critically low and even just stepping out of your house can get you an infection. You need to make an informed decision that is, number one, safety of the patient. Number two, give it some time. And if you need to, rush to the hospital. It's as simple as that. So there are certain points of data which will never be able to be standardized. And that's where I think expertise, experience comes in. So it's very difficult to say how technology can kind of bridge this gap, but it's good if data can give you an indicator like the Indian Medical Association said. They gave us 5 points. The saturation level is X. If someone is a lung patient with problems like pneumonia and bronchitis, don't even wait. 2 points, rush to the hospital. For everyone else, there were 5 points to meet and then go to the hospital. So standardization of data is important, but it's very difficult to explain what you just put across, because I think, doctors operate completely on data, which is the right way because the treatment is symptomatic. In integrative medicine, we prefer to look at the root cause of the patient, keeping safety the number one priority. So I don't know how technology can bridge this gap, but like he rightly said, Arjun rightly said about Dr. Devi Shetty, for example, how can you get 90% of his mind in a box? Like, what would he do in this situation? Okay, what would he do? But everyone knows that when he's doing a bypass surgery or when he's opening up a patient, there are certain techniques that can never, ever be replicated. But can we reach 99%, 98% of that? What's going on in his mind? And it's absolutely true, because AI today is looking at basketball players, they're looking at NBA players and trying to get them into a box. Like, what would you do when this player comes in front of you? They're trying to get to the closest possible way that your brain would react. Now, how efficient that would be, I don't know, but definitely technology can look at kind of bridging that gap.
I think so. While we wait for Rahul, I just wanted to sort of comment on. It's an excellent point that Luke made about different type of people, different type of the doctors have different conservatism, if you can call it that way. Some people are over-diagnosing, some people are under-diagnosing, and so on. So the question about what technology can play, right? We've tried this in breast cancer diagnosis, with automated screening tool. Is that an AI algorithm decides whether somebody has cancer or not based on a probability factor, right? And it is possible to convert this probability of probability that this patient belongs to a particular class of cancer, right? That probability can be converted into a score, right? So many of our tools can actually generate a confidence score from the AI algorithm that is being used, and this score can be used by the doctor who's using the tool to decide whether, along with other clinical factors, other historical factors which the tool may not be aware of, and make a decision. So we have found this really useful in Nirmai, where we generate 5 different scores. It helps in multiple ways. One is a score that is generated just based on vascular activity in the left and the right side breast, and then we see slightly more vascularity in the left breast, and then we see more lesion kind of activity in the left breast, and so on. So we give these 4 or 5 scores and explain to the doctor what the ML is thinking and how it's actually generating these scores. And then these scores are used along with the other factors to decide what is the likely follow-up action. Now, coming to how we create multiple Devi Shettis with this kind of thing is to have a reference system, how to actually interpret the score, and that is vetted through expert doctors. So, I mean, I'm actually very optimistic to have technology-enabled sort of ecosystem where we could have more objective, more repeatable kind of interpretations that can happen. So I'm just trying to add my views on this.
Thank you.
Yash? You're both sides. You're a patient as well as...
What we are trying to see is that, there is a clear way and path to be able to understand what is going to start working for specific patients and what will not start working for specific patients. And we're able to see those early trends in some of the things that we're doing. I'll give you a simple example. Like Arjun, we also offer some consults, and sometimes a doctor will write a prescription for a patient, and we'll instantly see that sugars are not going down or sugars are not in control. And we can instantly recommend that if a consult happened, prescription change has happened, sugars are not going down, something needs to go back and close the loop and go back to the doctor and say, hey, this is not working, and go back to the patient and say, hey, this is not working, and help them connect again. So AI will, and I won't even call it AI, I'd say basic common sense will start permeating through the system, and with all these fancy tools that we're able to explore, churning this data and looking at this data will make medicine more unique for individuals, and we'll be able to reach that stage faster. We will still not be able to replace the doctor, and there's no way that will happen in the near future, but we'll start making decisions smarter for doctors. And that's the journey where companies like us are wanting to allow consumers to benefit out of it. And once we're able to do that at a meaningful scale, that's when real impact is seen. So having a one-to-one with a doctor takes a lot of time, but doing this at scale, the only way to do it is to churn it through a lot of data, understand what that data starts to make, when that data starts to make sense for you, and when you can start predicting and guiding better. So once those solutions start getting deployed, I think we'll start seeing those changes take place across the whole ecosystem, whether it is the insurance sector looking at that data and saying, hey, thanks for being able to provide this insight to me so that I can prevent an adverse outcome happening in someone going to the hospital, or other scenarios with hospitals or even doctors being able to find value in that data. Today, all of us, I think, are trying to figure out how to capture a lot of this data and then how to churn it to make meaningful sense. And the faster we are able to do it as an ecosystem, the beneficiary is the patient.
Thank you, Yash. I would have loved to continue this, but Sneha has been gesturing to me that I think we are out of time. So over to you, Sneha.
All right. Thank you so much, Rahul. This has been a fabulous, enlightening session. In fact, there's so much that I have learned. This has been an eye-opener of the session, especially to me, and I'm sure to all of us in the audience as well. Thank you so much to all our panelists. Thank you for your time. With this, we'd like to wrap the session up. Thank you so much once again, everybody.